Hi, I'm Darrin Peppard. Welcome to the Leaning into Leadership podcast, the podcast dedicated to today's hardworking leader. Join me every Sunday for leadership insight, inspiration, and a little pep talk to keep you rolling down your road to awesome. Hey, my friends. Welcome into episode 114 of the Leaning into Leadership podcast. This episode, airing first on Christmas Eve Day, is very special. It's very special to me, and I think it's a very unique episode. I'm really excited to talk about this particular episode. You know, podcasters every now and again will get together and do some unique work, whether that's a home and home where, you know, one podcaster goes on another podcaster show and then they flip the script and go on each other's shows, similar to what I did earlier this year with Jay Dostal being on Jay's show and Jay being on mine. Occasionally, podcasters will do something called a collaboration, where the two podcasters record one episode and air it on both of their platforms. I did this earlier in August with Joshua Stamper and the Aspire Leadership podcast. So my friend Brian Martin and I, Brian does the Teaching Champions podcast. Brian's a big Buffalo Bills fan. I am, of course, a huge Denver Bronco fan. Actually can say that with some pride again. You know, there for a while, you couldn't say that with anything other than a smirk on your face. But recently the Broncos and the Bills played, and Brian and I were texting back and forth, and this idea was spawned. Let's get together. Let's do a shared episode, and let's put it on both of our platforms. So this particular holiday collaboration with the Teaching Champions podcast is something I'm super stoked about. Brian and I sat down and decided we would just ask each other random questions. So totally unscripted, and just Brian brought some really cool questions to the table, and I think I brought a couple pretty good ones for him. So we talk about education, we talk about entrepreneurship, we talk about books and podcasts and all kinds of other things. And of course, we've got a special holiday message for you. So folks, I hope you enjoy this collaboration half as much as Brian and I did putting it together. So with that, it's time to get on with the show, folks. All right, welcome into the Leaning into Leadership podcast.
And the Teaching Champions podcast. And we're super excited for this one because we're doing a joint collaboration for everyone today.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun, Brian. I really appreciate you being willing to do this. And, you know, folks, let's just like go right to it and be real transparent about how this came about. So at the time of this recording, we're a couple weeks removed from my football team, the Denver Broncos. It's interesting that I can say that now. Like 6 weeks ago, I would have had a hard time claiming that. But now they've won 5 in a row, including a win over Brian's Buffalo Bills. And we were texting during the game, right? And like, hey, we should do something with the podcast.
Yes. Yeah, it was pretty awesome. We were watching the game, and we're just watching, and it was pretty ugly at first. And, you know, I said, while we were texting back and forth, this game, no matter which way it turns out, it's going to be a crazy ending. And it was a crazy ending.
Oh, my goodness. It was absolutely a crazy ending. I mean, you miss a field goal, but the other team has 12 people on the field. I mean, come on. I mean, talk about a creative way to win a game or a creative way to lose a game, depending on how you look at it. And I think I told you this at the time, but I was in New York City. I had been working with one of my districts that I support in New Jersey, and I drove back and stayed really close to LaGuardia because I was flying out the next day. And so that next day, of course, I'm wearing a Bronco jersey, and man, there were a lot of Bills jerseys, including like 5 guys on my flight to Omaha. And you know, I know they walked on the plane and saw that Bronco jersey and were like, "Oh man," but
stung a little.
It's all good, right? Yeah, it did. So, but that led to us saying, you know, hey, what if we get together and do something with the podcasts, both Teaching Champions podcast and the Leaning into Leadership podcast. And, you know, let's let's do an episode that we record together and put them on both of our platforms. So you might be listening to this on the Teaching Champions podcast, which I will be doing because I listen to Teaching Champions every single week, or you might be listening to Leaning into Leadership, and which I know Brian does. So what we're going to do tonight, we're gonna just throw some questions back and forth between the two of us, things that we're just kind of curious about. Who knows where this conversation is going to go because it's totally unscripted. And we've already started talking about football. We might even continue with football a little bit too. You never know. So Brian, I'll throw it over to you to kind of get us rolling.
Yeah, so the neat thing about this is that we've been friends and connected for a while. I think since the beginning of my podcast, and I've watched you flourish with the road to awesome. And, as I watch you and see your brand and see everything that you're putting out there, it really made me want to think, and it really made me want to ask you, because as we were talking before we started taping the podcast, I only know my school district. I only know what I've seen in the 2 schools that I've taught in. But now you're in a place where you're traveling around the country. You see so many amazing school districts. You talk to administrators and educators from all over. So it just makes me curious, what do you notice, the great things that are happening out there that other schools are doing?
Yeah, I think that's an awesome question. But before I answer that, though, I've got to go right at something you said. You said before we were taping the podcast. And what's funny is there's no tape involved, right? But we continue to say that, right? Hey, make sure you tape that show. Well, no, it's all done digitally. But
it is pretty funny.
It is, yeah.
My brother-in-law listened to an episode, and he called me out on that. He goes, "You're really starting to show your age with the taping reference."
Well, we were both basketball coaches, right? And so,
Yep.
back at that point in time, when you watch game tape, it was actually tape. Now that's just not the case anymore. So what do I see? What do I see around the country, man? I'll tell you what, I see a whole lot of educators who are still really working their tails off. There's a lot of connotation right now around education that it's not a good place to be. That, teachers they're just punching out the second the bell rings. They're beating kids out of the parking lot. And, I think there are some who maybe are, I guess, they're sharing that message, because that's what they're doing, whether that's on TikTok or, on Instagram or whatever. And I get that. And I don't begrudge people at all. I mean, I think the work-life balance, I hate that phrase because balance is such a poor choice of words. But I mean, I understand that, and I think it's important. And I know this youngest new generation of teachers, Katie Kinder would call them baby teachers, they value things a little bit differently, and I think that's wonderful. So that said, man, there are educators all over this country who are working their tails off, and they still love kids, and they still love teaching, and they love learning. And I want to start with that because I don't think we should overlook the fact that by far and away, the bulk of teachers, in the face of a teacher shortage, an administrative shortage, funding challenges, legislative overreach, parents that, can be a little bit hyper involved, a little outspoken. In the face of all of that, they're still going hard, man. They really, really are. And, what I'm starting to see coming back are those conversations, those really deep conversations about student learning, about teaching, about rigor. I had a conversation just in the last couple of days. One of my districts in Nevada that I worked with, or that I'm still working with, rather. One of the principals, we were on a coaching call the other day, and he was talking about academic tenacity, and just that's their big thing right now is getting their learners to just be tenacious, to just not give up too easy. And I think that's a big challenge a lot of people have right now. But
Yes.
just some of those types of conversations, I know a lot of people are faced with some behavioral challenges. A conversation I had just this morning, honestly, with an assistant superintendent here in Nebraska, talking about this band of kids in that third, fourth, fifth grade range, so not far away from the age group you work with having, I can't remember the phrase she used for it, but, being diagnosed with like intermittent explosive disorder. I'm almost positive that's what it is. And, it's that like sudden fits of rage and those types of things. All of those challenges, what's amazing is people continue to work, and kids are learning, and kids are happy in school. And for the most part, teachers are happy in school. Is it perfect? No, but it never has been, right? But I think to the core of your question, and you kind of led in with, I don't remember if you said it when the record button had been hit or if it was before, but I know the stuff I've learned as an administrator, as a superintendent, and now in this coaching and consulting and speaking role. Man, I'll tell you what, there's some incredible, incredible things happening in classrooms that I know if I went back into a classroom now, man, I wouldn't know where to begin, because I've seen so many great things. And it just, I could riff on this thing for hours. I think I'm already kind of rambling a little bit on your question, but I've seen a lot of really, really great things. And it comes back to human beings doing everything they can, to help little people be a little bit better little people 9 months from now.
I love that. And I think that's so true. Like the passion. And it's just, you can reach a child in different ways, but you show up, you're passionate, you care about them. And like you said, I can walk down the hallway of my school and I just see some amazing teachers. And I sent out an email the other day to the ladies were crushing it. And I think they just needed to be reminded of that. And sometimes, like you said, sometimes in social media and other things, like it can have like a negative connotation. And sometimes inside the schools, it can feel a little bit negative. But if we walk down the hallway and we're deliberate in what we notice, what we look for, what we listen to, we're going to pass classrooms, we're going to pass students, and we're just going to see that joy inside those classrooms. We're going to see that great teaching. We're going to see teachers going above and beyond. And that makes you feel good. And it's just a positive reminder of this beautiful profession and what people are doing inside our schools.
Man, I love that so much. And, that honestly just leads so perfectly into my first question for you. Obviously, you already talked about it. We've been connected for a while. We've been friends for a while. And one of the things that I just love so much about you, you're such an optimistic person, but you also, having never been in your school, I'll say yet, having never been in your school, I'm certain that you are one of the big teacher leaders in that school. And, I think that teacher leadership is such a key, when working with schools around the country, those schools that are really performing at a high level, they're not reliant on just a principal to lead or a leadership team of principal and assistant principals or an instructional coach or a guidance counselor. There's leadership from the teacher ranks. Talk a little bit about your perception of teacher leadership, maybe some of the stuff you do as a teacher leader, and how that impacts the culture at your school.
Yeah, I think teacher leadership it's crucial. Sometimes we talk about like school culture, and obviously the administrator, they play such a huge role in that. But I think it's lost on sometimes how big of a role each and every single one of the adults, and it's not just the teachers, it's every individual within the school, how big of a role they play in that classroom or in that school culture. And I always think about Dr. Joe Sanfilippo, and one of his teachings that he's talked about over and over and over again is, recognize, acknowledge, and extend. And it's something that I've really taken to heart and I really try to do. So he says, you walk down the hallways, and just like we were talking about just a second ago, about noticing the good things that are happening. And they're happening all over. And then he says, so you notice it. So number one, that puts me in a good mental state. And then he says, you acknowledge it. You go up to that person, let them know, hey, you're crushing it. I love what you're doing. And then he says, you go down the hallway, and this is the most important part. He says that you extend that. You go into someone else's classroom. And if I saw you, Darrin, down the hallway just crushing it in this unbelievable lesson, I go into my next door neighbor's classroom and I say, you should see what Darrin's doing down there. He's just, that lesson that he just did, what he just did for that student was absolutely amazing. And he says what happens is eventually that person that I just told is going to go and tell you about the amazing things that he's hearing about you. And what happens is just that domino effect or that ripple effect where, it extends to everybody. So everybody's watching it and talking about each other in a positive way. So I guess, I look at that, and my strong suit, there are ladies that know the curriculum back and forth, and they are just absolutely amazing. And they lead in that area. My what I try and do is lead in that is the spreading of the great things that are happening. I try. I'm the only male educator. I've always been the only male educator in my buildings outside of like the phys ed teacher. And sometimes I've worked with some male administrators, but I've been the only male teacher. So I'm trying to embrace that, because kind of you stand out a little bit. So, always talking to all the kids. The kindergarten students, they line up right in front of my classroom every morning. So every morning I go out and we do a countdown from 10 to 0. And, kind of let the whole school know, just with us, that the bell's ringing, they walk by and I give them high fives. And it's just, in assemblies, I get up and I lead the school in some cheers. And it's just trying to, being the teacher leader that is trying to set the tone and what I can do. What's my strong suit? My strong suit is recognizing the good, sharing the good, extending that good. So that, that's I guess my big piece that I hopefully bring to my building.
Well, I think the most important piece there is your mindset, and just looking for the positives. When you're looking for something, you're going to find it. Whether you're looking for the positives, you're looking for the negatives, or whatever the case may be. And I think that's definitely a strength that you have, and it's awesome that you're bringing that into your school. And you're so right too. With anytime that you're finding something positive, you're pointing it out, and then carrying it down the hallway to somebody else. And I love that you're quoting Joe Sanfilippo. Big shout out to Joe. He's such an amazing leader, such an amazing human being, and definitely a key piece there in the culture is making sure that not only that we're looking for it, but we're pointing it out, and then we're sharing it with somebody else, saying, "Man, you got to go see what Brian's doing. This is just so cool." I love that so much, man. Great answer.
Yeah, and I always want to share too. When you talk about teacher leadership, what I always try and tell other people is one of the biggest lessons I learned was from you, my friend. And you've talked about it, so I don't want to steal your story too much. About what are the two things, the two questions? Why is it always about what they're doing wrong? Why isn't it about what they're doing right? And I try, and I think that's so important, like being a classroom teacher, and I'm sure administrators, you guys have an unbelievable job, so many fires that you put out. But if all I see in that student that's having a difficult time is that difficultness, or that one thing that's wrong, that they do wrong, then it's going to be hard to make those connections. So that lesson from you, like when we're not seeing eye to eye, we're not on the same page with a student, I have to be cognizant of my own self, my own feelings, my own mindset, and step back. And I've done it so many times. So I thank you, brother, is
I
just
appreciate that.
In my head, what are the amazing things about that student? Because there are so many amazing things.
Yeah, no, I love that. It makes me think of a conversation that I had today with a principal and a couple of his lead teachers who their school is in a jail. And, here's, they're down a couple of teachers. They have a hard time, kind of recruiting a little bit. But listening to the three of them talk and tell their story of what it's like to work with incarcerated youth, and to hear things like, you're the first math teacher to actually just sit down and walk through a problem with me. They have kids who want to learn. They have kids who want to do well. Yes, they've made poor choices in their life, but that doesn't mean that they don't deserve another chance. And, you talk about people who are looking for the good in others. Man, these folks that are working in institutions around the country, working with incarcerated youth, holy cow, man, shout out to them. Because you talk about going with a mindset. I mean, you could go in with the mindset of, well, these kids, they're broken, they're not going to graduate, they're this, they're that. Or you could remember they're little human beings who maybe made some poor choices. No questions asked. They've made some poor choices, but that doesn't mean that they don't still continue to deserve an opportunity. And that just made me think about that conversation today, man. It was a really powerful conversation.
No, that sounds like an amazing conversation. And that's a tough job, but the power of belief, like one person, those people going in and believing in those kids, the effect that can have on them in their future.
Yeah.
Unreal.
It's unreal, man. It really is.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
Awesome. So I got another question for you, my friend, and this is something that I think is important because, like, resilience. And we just talked about, like, not every day is a good day. We got to learn how to handle the ups and downs. And leaving, like, the school district that you were in to go on the consultant path. That's tough, especially, the first year, there's always that growth curve. There's so much to learn, the ups and downs. So what were some of the biggest lessons that you've taken away over the past year and a half? What were some of the strategies that you used? Because there had to be some tough moments. So what were some of the strategies that you used to help you, mindset-wise, get through those tough days?
Man, I love this question. I really do. And I would tell you that the number one lesson, and I continue to learn this lesson all the time, is patience. Because it's something I'm not very good at. And, in this work, so much of it is about, it's relationships. And, people don't typically form a relationship with somebody just out of the blue. There needs to be something, that sparks the connection. You and I connect probably through Twitter. I think is how we got initially connected, and we had some things that were common. And so in this line of work, you have to put yourself in a place where you can start to build those relationships. And social media is a tiny fraction of it. It's really, it's getting in front of people. I tell people all the time, people reach out to me quite frequently now and say, hey, how do I get into the line of work that you do? And, nobody hires somebody to speak if they don't know they're in the business to speak. You need
Right.
to actually go do it. And, that means sometimes, budgeting and we do it here at RTA. I'm budgeting for X number of conferences that I'll pay my own way. Yes, I'm going to have some where I'm paid to be there as the keynote speaker, or I'm paid to be there as a featured speaker, and I'll do some breakout sessions or whatever the case may be. But I had to get in front of a lot of audiences. And again, the relationship piece is huge. People want to work with people they know, right? People want to work with people they trust. And for me, that first year and a half, it was one, leaning on relationships I already had, and not like, leaning on people like, hey, you need to hire me. Not in any way, shape, or form. The advice I tell people right now is just reach out to people that you know and say, hey, can I just share with you what I'm doing and get your feedback? Right? I talked to hundreds of people in that first year or so, and I just wanted to learn from them. What were they struggling with? What were their challenges? Because, you kind of alluded to this, Brian, like, you've been in the two buildings that you were in. I worked in a district in Northwest Arizona as a classroom teacher. I worked in a district in Southwest Wyoming as a school level administrator, and then a district in the mountains in Colorado as a superintendent. Those were my schema, right? So I knew what the challenges were where I was, but that doesn't mean that I know the challenges where you are in Western New York, or where, somebody is in North Carolina, or, in California, or fill in the blank, right? So I just really started leaning into those relationships and just talking to people, because this is something I think a lot of people don't realize in the line of work that I do now. The whole thing is all about solving problems and helping other people solve problems. It's not about, ooh, hey, I want to talk about Road to Awesome. I mean, I do, but the problem that we're solving there is when we have, school culture, climate, classroom culture and climate that isn't where we want it to be. It's that's a big piece of it. So definitely the patience, definitely, learning the importance of the relationship thing. I mean, I've always been really good at networking and relationship building, so I think that benefited me. Everything to do with the back of the house, so everything about a business, I had to learn that. And, I've been really fortunate there, as somebody who is a coach, as a leadership coach, I believe strongly in coaching, so much so that I have a coach. I have a business coach, and I'm part of a business mastermind. Actually, through the Teach Better Network, I'm part of the Teach Better MBA program. So they have actually two. You're welcome, Gargus. This sounds like a commercial for you. But they have two different programs. They have the MBA program for those who are full-time in the business like I am. There's, I think, 5 or 6 of us. And then they have their edupreneur, which is really for people kind of doing, like the side hustle thing. They're still in the classroom or still an administrator, and also starting to do this work. And having a coach has been just invaluable to me. And I also have a couple of mentors in the space. And, so being willing to learn from others in the space, guys like Tom Cody, Steve Bowler, they've been huge for me. Just having the opportunity to just talk to them and learn from them. What do you do in this situation, or how do you get into this type of a space, or what associations do I need to be a part of, and that kind of stuff. The learning curve, it was a vertical line, man. It really was, and it's not flattening out, but it's not a straight vertical line anymore. We're 2.5 years into it, and I mean, the same thing's true with the book side of our business. Just learning so much of the ins and outs. I mean, there are a lot of different opportunities out there for how you publish books, and so it's really like finding the one that's just the right fit for a specific book. The system, by which we take in new authors. Accept book proposals, all of that kind of stuff. It's been a really interesting process. I don't even know if I answered your question, man. I think I just kind of just squirreled off into Never Never Land there.
No, you crushed it, man. And what I love, a couple of things that I love, and I love listening to people that are doing other things. Like, you have this business where you talk about, because I listen to a lot of business podcasts, and they talk about having that mastermind where you can bounce ideas off of. When you hear these great business leaders, and they talk about like having mentors that you can learn from, because I think that's so important. Being coached, like, we're both big sports guys, and if you listen to someone like, I think it was a story about Kevin Garnett, and he goes up to Boston, and him and Doc Rivers meet up, and Kevin Garnett, he's a pretty intense guy, and he was all about to Doc Rivers, you need to coach me. Here's an all-NBA Hall of Famer saying, I want to be coached. So these guys are making multi-million dollars, are willing to be coached. And sometimes, we get afraid as educators. Sometimes we want those, when the administrators pushed in, we get the dog and pony show out to show the best lesson. I want, you got to feel comfortable with your administrator, but I want you to come in and I want you to coach me and tell me how I can do better. And then the last part that I love that you talked about is the relationship piece. And you're so good with the relationship piece. And I was talking to Lainey Rowell last night. Amazing woman. Check out her podcast.
Love Lainey Rowell.
Yeah, Evolving with Gratitude. And one of the things that I asked her, I said, hey, what is like one of the biggest lessons that you've learned from someone on the podcast? And she took it in a little bit different direction, but she said, which I love, she said one of the people that she talked to said, to be interesting, you have to be interested.
Yeah.
That you have to be a great listener. And I just think for all of us, like if we worried more about listening, what we could truly learn from one another. So, and that gets into the relationship piece, because everything we do at the school front, home front, it's all about relationships.
100%, man. 100%. I want to just expand a little bit on the coaching piece that you talked about. I don't know. I have a feeling you've probably watched it, but I think it's on Netflix, the series Quarterback. That one season that they did, they had Patrick Mahomes, Kirk Cousins, and Marcus Mariota. And one of the things that was, first off, it was just a fascinating series. But a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who, arguably the best player in the league right now. I would argue for your boy Josh Allen, my boy Josh Allen. But man, he's right there, right? And,
100%.
You get to see things in that series where it isn't just like what they're doing on the field. And the number of people coaching Patrick Mahomes, it's not just that he has a quarterback coach and Andy Reid is his head coach. He has a strength and conditioning person just for him. He hired him, somebody he, I think, went to high school with. And just, has this very specific routine and regimen. And he's paying this coach, he's probably paying him an insane amount of money to take on one client all throughout the year. And that's the kind of coaching people just don't realize how much goes into what those really true top level athletes. Michael Jordan is true of him. It's, true of, you mentioned Kevin Garnett's a great example. Kobe Bryant was that way. It's not just, I got my head coach. It's so much more than that. So I don't even know if you even saw that show, but holy cow, it was incredible.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. I just love seeing that though, because there's a whole team that we never see. But the investment to take yourself from good to great to that top echelon, you don't get there unless you outwork everybody and you just have a team of people around you.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah. Okay, so you asked me about something that I learned in my new venture. So I got to ask you about something that you've learned. So you've been podcasting longer than I have. When this drops, we're somewhere in the, I don't know, 115, 120 episodes, somewhere in that neighborhood. And you are double that. So in the time that you've been podcasting, and you can take this in any direction you want to go. So this could be about podcasting. It could be about teaching. It could be about whatever. Just share some things you've learned because you were a podcaster.
Yeah. So some things I've learned that there's some pretty amazing people out there that if you, like we were just talking about, like if you take the time to sit down and listen, you can learn some great things. If you take the time to reach out, it's amazing how many people like, and I learned this from a guy I used to coach basketball with, because he would watch Division I basketball programs, and he would reach out to these programs and just ask them a question about like an inbounds play or something about their offense. And it wasn't always like the head coach that would get back to him. It might be like one of the assistants, but they would get back to him. And I found that with like the teaching world, and that if you reach out to people, a lot of people really want to help you out. So yeah, just that, the people that you surround yourself with matter. And that's one beautiful thing about the podcasting world is that you connect. It's almost like a jolt of, that dopamine that I get after every conversation that you have. You jump on and it's like a blind date almost. A lot of these people you don't know. So you're connecting with them for the first time. You might have interacted with them on social media, but you jump on with them. And it's like you sit down and have a cup of coffee and you just riff and you talk, and I'm sitting there to learn. And then, I guess another big lesson that I take that may be applicable for people who don't have a podcast is to cheer on others, like that comparison trap. That if I compare my podcast to you, then I get caught up in the numbers. That if I cheer you on and I look at my podcast and Joe Rogan doesn't have anything to worry about, I'm not going to overtake Joe Rogan. But if I look
Ed
at
Milet is safe. I'm not going to catch Ed Milet anytime soon. Right?
So they can sleep well tonight knowing that.
There you go.
But if we look at the process, like my reason for podcasting is to connect with awesome people and to learn. And I think, if you really step back and honest with what you want out of something, that why. So I guess those are the big things.
Yeah, I love that, man. Typically when I have a guest on that I've never met before, we actually do like a Zoom call weeks before, or at least a week before we do the show. Because I do want to at least, not do the blind date thing 100%. Right. But I think it's always so interesting, the people that you meet and that you get to know and that you find just these interesting things, about them. And, I tell them quite frequently, because I like to kind of, hey, here's, kind of why the podcast exists, especially when it's, I get a lot of the, solicited, hey, have so-and-so on your podcast kind of thing. Right. And, I want to tell them, hey, here's the reason for the podcast. And when I first launched this podcast, the truth is I wanted it to be, about great leadership, but I also wanted, I had to increase the brand, right? I needed to increase that footprint that I have and further establish myself, I guess, as an expert in the leadership space. And while I think that has happened, man, what really has happened is, number one, I get to sharpen my saw every single conversation I have. I mean, you are so right, man. The people we get to interact with, it's incredible. But the other thing is, man, I'm just like you. I mean, that jolt of dopamine when we finish this conversation, I mean, it's like running, like it's turbocharged right now, man, because this is a freaking awesome conversation. And so many of those, you come away with it like, oh my God, I can't wait until everybody gets to hear this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why we get caught up in our numbers. It's like, well, no, more people need to hear this.
Yes.
This is so good. And not what I said, but what my guest said. It's so good, So I like that you said that about podcasting. I mean, it's really cool. I wasn't sure where you would go. I could have pointed you in the direction like, hey, wait, what would you tell somebody who wants to podcast? Or, what did you learn about yourself or whatever? But I love where you actually went with that because, again, it's back to the, it's a people business, right? It's about relationships. And that's one of the beautiful things I think about podcasting, man. It's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And the neat thing is when we talk about cheering each other on, like I know that we've connected. Like you got the Joshua Stampers, the Kyle Hills, the Dr. Christopher Jones, the Laney Rouse that are all podcasters, just phenomenal people. And everybody's out to help each other out, which is super cool too.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't look at anybody's podcast as competition. I just look at it as inspiration. Like, and I mean, everybody you listed right there, I listen to their shows. I also listen to, like you mentioned, some business podcasts. I listen to business podcasts. I listen to marketing podcasts. I listen to self-help stuff. I mean, Ed Milet, John Acuff, All It Takes a Goal. Like, I mean, I just nerd out on those. Scott Jeffrey Miller on Leadership podcast. I mean, just on and on and on, man. That and every one of them, it's like I listen to how they lead into a guest or some of the things they ask a guest. Or I actually caught myself, and this episode, when this one is live, this episode I'm going to talk about has already been dropped. But I actually asked a guest, hey, let's rewind a couple of decades, which is a Scott Jeffrey Miller thing from On Leadership. He says it every single time, and I didn't plan on doing it, but it's like I stole from him. I'm like, No, but again, he's not tuning in and listening to my show, I don't think, too often, so we're probably okay.
Yeah, no, and I love that, and that's what I was thinking about, like, when you were talking about yourself and the mentors, because I do the same thing that you do. Is I listen to so many different podcasts from, so many different categories, but I look at it as like I'm studying, like not just the content that the guest is sharing, but how is that host, having that conversation? What are certain things that he does to hook in the audience? Yeah. How does he ask questions? So, that mentors, they don't have to be specifically aligned with us. I can say, Ed Milet, he's my mentor because I'm listening to how he frames his podcast. Or John Acuff, how does he, because he's so amazing with his humor, how does he set up the humor inside his podcast? Yeah, so I think that's awesome.
100%.
Well, here's a question for you, brother. Going in, the year is wrapping up. 2023 is wrapping up. 2024, what is next on the agenda for Road to Awesome?
Whew, man, that's a great question. It's interesting, tying back to a previous question, one of the things that I've learned, I was never a huge fan of strategic planning when I was a superintendent, when I was a building principal, but we've actually been working on our strategic plan here for the business, and that's been really important for us to be a little bit more focused on what we have, coming up down the road and where we're going with some different things. I'll tell you that, we've got some great books coming in 2024 from some incredible authors, people like Coach Kurt Hines will have his book coming soon. We've got a book coming from Jamie Brown. We've got a book coming from, Todd Bloomer. We've got a book coming from Martin Silverman. There's a handful of others that are out there. J.B. Gross, we've got a book coming from him. So a lot of exciting things in the book area. I'm working on another book. I'm actually working on two. I've got one. What the heck? I might as well go ahead and let the cat out of the bag. Yeah. Katie Kinder and I talked about it a couple episodes ago on my show. Katie Kinder and I are writing a book together. We're going to be focusing on some stuff with classroom culture and classroom management and some of those types of things. So certainly that's coming. I'm going to be all over the place speaking in 2024, which is a lot of fun, from Oregon to North Carolina, from California to New York. Man, I'm all over the place. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And I think it's, at this point in time for us, it's just continuing to do the work that we're doing. What has really taken off at Road to Awesome. And it's not one that you see a lot of, sharing on social media and stuff, because it's the one-on-one coaching. It's the leadership team coaching that has really become a big deal. And that, honestly, that consumes probably 70% of my time right now. Whether that's, working with an individual superintendent or an individual principal or a leadership team at a school or a leadership team in an entire district. And I think we've got, we're probably coaching about 38 people right now. So I think that's just going to continue to grow in 2024. And, and we'll just keep rocking and rolling on the Leaning Into Leadership podcast, man. That's what's going on here. So I've got one final question for you, and then I know you're going to ask me about books. So, you and I both have a final question we ask people on our show. So even though this is both shows, I'm still going to ask you what I ask everybody on Leaning Into Leadership. Like right now, Brian, what are you doing to lean into leadership?
Yeah, you know what? Just trying to get better, to evolve. And we both talked about, the Ed Milet show. And I think I heard this person on the Ed Milet show. I can't remember her name, but she had an acronym, and she said HOPE. And she said HOPE stands for her, help one person every day. So I guess I heard that. I whipped out my phone and I wrote it down. And at the end of the day, I'll try and be a good teacher. I'll try and be a great teacher and get better. But if I can help one person every day, whether that's a student or it's the colleague, because they need just as much as help as we do. Just because we're adults doesn't mean that we shouldn't be there for one another. If I can help them out every single day, then when I hit the sack at night, I can call it a good day. So I guess that's how I'm trying to lean into leadership, brother.
Man, I love that. That's awesome. That is outstanding. I actually listened to that same episode. I remember that. And what it stood out to me because we have another author who her book will probably be out in 2024 as well, Brandy Kelly, Dr. Brandy Kelly. And her book will be actually titled Leading with Hope, but hope stands for something different for Dr. Kelly. So that's going to be pretty exciting.
We'll have to keep our eye out for that.
That's right.
Awesome. Now, one of my favorite questions on my podcast is, what is some book recommendations that you have?
Man, that's just such a great question. I've got a couple that I always go to with folks, and I think instead of maybe going there, I'm gonna throw a couple out that are fairly recent for me. People that that I think really super highly of. Just had him on the show here very recently. Steve Bowler, who I mentioned him earlier, he's one of my mentors, but his book, Stand Tall Leadership, I think is just an absolutely spectacular book. Steve is one of those people who, he tells it like it is, but he's also, he's very humorous. He's very intelligent. He's very well spoken, and his book it just absolutely hits it out of the park. I just absolutely love that book. That's one that I'm a huge fan of. I'll throw a couple others that actually are Road to Awesome books, but they're also absolutely spectacular books. I think you've had her on the show, Crystal Frommert's book, the book When Calling Parents Isn't Your Calling. Mm-hmm. Buddy, every educator on the planet should have that book in their hand. It is the playbook for parent communication. I just think it's fantastic. And, just an awesome, uplifting book. Kip Schubert's book, Struggle to Strength, is truly one of those unbelievable stories of perseverance, of rising above. And staying focused on what really matters.
Mm-hmm.
Kip's an incredible human being too, and so those, from a book perspective, I would tell you there's three really good ones, and I'll add this. I haven't got it yet because it hasn't come out. By the time this drops on Christmas Eve, that's right. Merry Christmas, everybody. I'm a huge Alex Cross fan. So James Patterson's newest Alex Cross is dropping this month. And by the time this podcast is live, I will probably either be reading it or will have just finished it.
That's fantastic. My dad's a big fan of his too. So those are some great book recommendations. And I have to say, like, Crystal, she was on the show. I had the chance to read her book, and that is a book that everybody needs to read. It's whether you're a first-year teacher all the way up to now, you're a veteran teacher. So many great tips in that book. And Kip's book, we're trying to connect. I know Kip's going to be eventually on the Teaching Champions podcast, so I was prepping for it, and I read his book. And here's another thing about podcasting that sometimes, and we do this in life, we get a vision of who people are in our minds, but we don't truly appreciate them. And then, I read Kip's book, and, I thought he was a great guy before, but how honest and authentic and truthful he was in those pages, like, it just how I viewed him just skyrocketed. So those I definitely
it's an incredible book, man. I get the opportunity to see those books in their most raw form when they first come into us, and obviously Jessica, our editor, my lovely wife, does an incredible job with those books. But it's amazing because I'll read a book 5-6 times before it ultimately is released. And, I'll just say this about Kip's book. There are 3 parts in that book. I could read it again tomorrow, and it'd probably be the 8th or 10th time I've read it, and I will cry in all 3 of those parts. I mean, they just, oh man, he's a great storyteller, but he's also an incredible human being. So yeah, thanks for saying that about him. All right. So Brian, I was going to ask you about podcasts. I was going to ask you to tell me like your favorites, because you've already mentioned those. But look, man, here's the thing. This episode, we both know this episode is going to go live on both of our shows on December 24th. So you know what? Let's talk about the holidays a little bit. Like I don't know, Brian, man, do you have like a favorite, I don't know, maybe a holiday memory that stands out to you, or a favorite holiday movie, or something that every time this time of year that just like is your thing?
Yeah, the holidays, it's such a special time of the year. It's special, so I work in the primary level with those second graders, and just the energy. Now, they were bringing the energy today to the classroom, but to see the joy in them and the excitement in them, a great memory just happened the other day. So, I don't have any kids. So I sometimes, even though I'm at the primary level and I get to experience all of the joy, the winter recitals for my students, I don't get the other side of it. So a beautiful memory that just happened the other day is we went to my nephew's winter concert. So it was about an hour and a half away. We drove up there at nighttime, and it was pretty neat because it was snowing a little bit, so it had that winter feel. And we just go into the auditorium, and it was a 4th grade through a 12th grade concert. And just to be in there.
Oh, wow. 4th grade through 12th grade. Wow.
Yeah. So it's a small school district. It's a pretty, we're rural Western New York, so it's a small district. But you just see like the parents and the grandparents there. And there's something special, like to feel that energy and to see the kids go up on the risers, and you just hear them sing And it just kind of, we get caught up in the daily stressors and all the noise. But in that moment, when everybody turns that noise and that negativity and the stuff off, and you just look up at these kids and everybody's just kind of locked in and just embracing that moment. So, I guess that the most recent memory, it was a beautiful moment though, too. So how about for yourself, brother? What was a great winter memory for you?
Oh, I love that so much. I would tell you there are a couple. I'll go back to, as a kid, when it came time to decorate, put up the Christmas tree and all that kind of stuff. As a really young kid, we had this big, huge German stereo. It's called a Telefunken. I mean, it is a massive piece of furniture. And, it was not just a radio and all that kind of stuff, but also, it, was like a turntable, the old, record player, right? Mm-hmm. And it has incredible sound, or it had incredible sound. And, I remember just, as a kid, listening to, different Christmas albums, while we were, trimming the tree. My two sisters, mm-hmm. my mom, my dad, whether that was, stuff from Bing Crosby or, Elvis or whatever, just mm-hmm. listening to that kind of stuff while we were trimming the tree. And then just sitting, honestly, my mom and I together, on Christmas Eve, we'd always watch White Christmas. And this year I will be at my mom and dad's on Christmas Eve, and we'll watch White Christmas. So that one just always stands out to me. The interesting thing that German Telefunken no longer is functional, but it's actually sitting right behind me. It is a piece of furniture now here in my home, and we've long since taken the radio guts and stuff out of it. But they purchased it in the late 1960s in Germany. My dad was in the service. My sister and I both were born over there, and so that thing carries a lot of memories with it too. The second one I'll tell you now. This kind of moves forward to my family, my wife and my daughter, us. Our tradition now when we decorate for Christmas, and we did it here just a week or so ago. We started off by watching National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, which I will argue with anybody. I mean, I will fight to the end to argue that is the best Christmas movie of all time. And so yeah, we watch National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, and put up the Christmas decorations and that kind of stuff. Just love that stuff, man. It's that's what the holidays are about, right? Just being around family. You talk about going and watching your nephew's Christmas program, and us just having those traditions around decorating. So yeah, that's what it's all about, man. This show, we know this show's going out on Christmas Eve day, so for everybody, it's certainly our wishes for happy holidays, no matter what holiday you're celebrating this time of year. Definitely we want to wish everybody very happy holidays.
Yes, we hope everyone out there just has a wonderful holidays. You embrace the moment, embrace that time with your loved ones, and we're thankful for all you guys.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, I'm really thankful for you, man. This episode, oh my gosh, this was so much fun. I'm so glad we had the idea and go back to, texting during the Broncos and Bills. And hopefully, now when we're getting closer and closer to the playoffs, hopefully both of them, or at least one of them, still has a chance, right, to make the playoffs, and we can enjoy some January football, right?
Absolutely. And I love you. I'm grateful for you, brother, and any moment that I can spend a little time with you, even if it's witnessing 12 men on the football field, I'll take it, buddy.
Right on. Yeah, I hear you, man. Well, hey, this was a blast. Folks, thank you for joining us on whichever platform you're listening to. So I will say thank you for joining us here on the Leading Into Leadership podcast. And
I'll say thank you for joining for all my listeners on the Teaching Champions podcast.
Right on. Happy holidays, everybody.
Take care.
All right, folks, just some quick final thoughts for all of my listeners here on Leading Into Leadership. Number one, I want to again say thank you to Brian Martin for coming together with me on this very special collaboration. Man, that was such a blast putting that together and having those conversations with him. Again, somebody I really super highly respect and really admire. Appreciate him as an educator, as a podcast, and as a human being. Second thought is this, it's the holiday season. And, I'm recording this a little bit ahead of the actual holiday season, the actually, Christmas Eve day when this podcast goes live. But, I've been so excited about the holiday season. I talked about this a little bit in the episode, and I guess this is your pep talk for the week. Take the time to just enjoy the holidays. If you're thinking about work, set it aside. Turn the email notifications off on your phone. Leave your laptop in the backpack where it belongs. Really engage with family, really stay focused, allow yourself to recharge, allow yourself to be whole again, right? I mean, folks, this work takes so much out of us. It really does. And if you weren't giving yourself to it, if you didn't care, if you didn't love kids and love what you do, then you wouldn't feel that way. All right? So just don't lose sight of the fact that you've got to refill your cup in order to pour into others when you go back in 2024. So take the time, catch your breath, relax a little bit, have some fun. Don't worry so much about work. All right, take that for what it's worth. Happy holidays, folks. Have a real awesome week.
Thank you for listening to the Leaning into Leadership podcast, brought to you by Road to Awesome. Don't forget, click subscribe, give a review, and share this with somebody who might also enjoy leaning into leadership.